In the ancient and fortified city of Thebes, ruled by the house of Cadmus, lived Queen Niobe. She was a woman born of greatness and destined for tragedy. Her lineage was unmatched among mortals. She was the daughter of Tantalus, the Lydian king who had famously dined at the table of the gods on Mount Olympus. Her husband was Amphion, the legendary musician king whose lyre played with such magic that the heavy stones of Thebes' walls had moved into place by themselves. Niobe possessed everything a mortal could desire. Her palace was filled with Phrygian gold, her wardrobes with the finest purple silks, and her beauty was said to rival the goddesses themselves. When she walked through the streets, her eyes flashed with a regal fire, and her movements commanded silence and awe. But Niobe's greatest treasure and her fatal flaw were her children. She was the mother of 14 perfect offspring, 7 sons tall and strong as young oaks, and 7 daughters graceful and fair as willow trees. These were the Niobids, the pride of Thebes. Every time Niobe looked at them, her heart swelled not just with love, but with a dangerous, intoxicating arrogance. She believed herself to be the most blessed woman in the history of the world, superior even to the immortals. Her happiness was absolute, but it was built on the fragile foundation of hubris, the excessive pride that the gods despise above all else. The doom of the house of Amphion began on the holy day of Leto. The prophetess Manto, daughter of Tiresias, had walked through the streets calling out to the women of Thebes, "Go, go in procession to the temple of Leto and her twins, Apollo and Artemis. Wive your hair with laurel and offer pious incense, for the goddess commands it." The women of Thebes obeyed. They crowded the altars, their heads bowed in reverence, the sweet smoke of frankincense rising to the heavens. Suddenly, the temple doors were thrown open. Niobe swept in, surrounded by her retinue, dressed in robes interwoven with gold thread that caught the light like fire. She looked beautiful, but terrible in her anger. She stopped the ceremony, her voice ringing out with scorn. "What madness is this?" she cried, her eyes blazing. "Do you prefer gods you have only heard of to the gods you see standing before you? Why is Leto worshipped at these altars while my divinity is neglected? My father is Tantalus, the only guest of the gods. My grandsire is Atlas, who holds up the sky. My husband rules this city. And look at my house, it is full of children. Leto, this goddess you worship, is a vagrant who could find no place on earth to give birth until a floating island took pity on her. And she has but 2 children. I have 14. I am 7 times richer than she is. My womb is 7 times more blessed. Even if fortune were to turn against me, she could not take enough to reduce me to Leto's level. Turn away from these sacrifices. Tear the laurel from your hair. Go home. Worship me, the true mother of Thebes." Terrified by her blasphemy, the women dropped their wreaths and extinguished the fires, murmuring prayers under their breath to avert the disaster they knew was coming. Far above the earth, on the peak of Mount Cynthus, Leto heard every arrogant word. To a goddess, there is no greater crime than a mortal claiming superiority. But Leto was not just a goddess, she was a mother, and her children were the most powerful archers in the pantheon. She turned to her son Apollo and her daughter Artemis. Her voice trembled with divine indignation. "Children," she said, "I, your mother, who am proud to have borne you, and being treated as nothing by a mortal queen. Niobe drives my worshippers from my altars. She dares to count her brood against mine. She calls me childless in comparison to her litter. Unless you punish her tongue, she will soon deny that you are gods at all." Apollo, the lord of the silver bow, interrupted her. "Stop your tears, mother," he said, his voice cold and hard as iron. "Every word of complaint only delays her punishment."
"Agreed," said Artemis, stringing her golden bow. Shrouded in a veil of clouds to hide their brilliance, the two avenging deities descended from the sky. They did not land in the city, they landed on the towers of the citadel, overlooking the plain where the youth of Thebes exercised.
Below them, on the training fields, the 7 sons of Niobe were displaying their skill. They were riding spirited horses, wrestling in the dust, and casting javelins. They were full of life, unaware that death was watching from the walls. The eldest, Ismenus, was guiding his horse in a tight circle when a sudden sharp sound, like the snapping of a lyre string, echoed from the sky. He cried out, "Oh, I am slain!" An arrow, invisible to the eye, but guided by a god, had pierced his heart. He dropped the reins and fell slowly from his saddle, dead before he hit the ground. Panic erupted. The second son, Sipylus, heard the twang of the divine bow and spurred his horse to flee, like a ship captain furling sails in a storm. But the arrow of Apollo was faster than any horse. It struck him in the neck, and he tumbled forward over his horse's mane, staining the earth with his blood. 2 brothers, Phaedimus and Tantalus, named after his grandfather, were wrestling chest to chest. A single arrow drove through them both, pinning them together in a grotesque embrace. They groaned in unison, and their souls fled together. Another brother ran to help them and fell dead over their bodies. The 6th was struck in the leg and then the chest. The youngest, a boy named Ilioneus, seeing his brothers fall to an invisible enemy, raised his arms to the heavens. "O gods, all of you, spare me!" he begged. It is said that Apollo's heart was moved for a split second by the child's plea, but the arrow had already left the string. It was fatal. In minutes, the field was silent. 7 princes, the future of Thebes, lay dead in the dust. Rumors of the slaughter reached the palace. King Amphion, seeing the ruin of his house and unable to bear the grief, drove a dagger into his own heart, dying beside his sons. Niobe rushed out to the plain, her hair wild, surrounded by her 7 daughters. She found the bodies of her husband and her sons. She threw herself upon them, kissing their cold faces. But then, looking up at the sky, her grief turned into a final, defiant madness. She screamed at the invisible Leto, "Feast, cruel Leto, feast on my sorrow. Satisfy your savage heart with my tears. But know this, even in my misery, I am still greater than you. I have lost 7, but I still have 7. You have only 2. I am still the winner. My house still stands." The echo of her boast had not faded when the bowstring twanged again. This time, it was the sound of Artemis. The 7 daughters, dressed in black mourning robes, were standing by the biers of their brothers. One by one, they began to fall. One collapsed while pulling an arrow from her brother's corpse. Another died while trying to comfort her mother. One tried to run and fell forward. They dropped like leaves in a winter storm. Finally, only the youngest daughter remained. She ran to Niobe, hiding her face in her mother's robes. For the first time, Niobe humbled herself. Her pride shattered. She covered the girl with her own body, hunching over her to shield her. "Spare only this one," she screamed, her voice breaking. "The youngest. Leave me just one out of so many." But there is no mercy for Hubris. The arrow struck the child, even as she clung to her mother's dress. She sat amidst the corpses of her husband, her 7 sons, and her 7 daughters. She was finally alone. Niobe did not scream anymore. She did not move.
The magnitude of her loss was so great that it froze the very blood in her veins. The wind blew her hair, but she did not brush it away. Her eyes stopped blinking, fixed on the nothingness of the horizon. Slowly, a transformation took hold. Her skin turned gray and cold. Her limbs stiffened and grew heavy. Her tongue turned to stone in her mouth. Her heart, once beating with pride, became a rock. She had become a statue of marble, frozen in eternal grief. Yet, even as stone, she could not stop weeping. Tears continued to well up in her marble eyes and trickle down her frozen face. A great whirlwind swept the statue away, carrying it across the sea to her ancestral homeland in Phrygia. It placed her on the lonely peak of Mount Sipylus. There, to this day, travelers can see a rock formation that looks like a bowing, weeping woman. When the snow melts or the rain falls, water trickles endlessly down the face of the stone. The eternal tears of Niobe, the queen who thought she was greater than the gods.